Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Sunday, so that means the Sunday scan. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I'll just start everything off. Instead of starting with charts, let's talk about the week because it is action-packed, guys. Beginning on Monday, we have PMI starting at 9:45. Tuesday, we have retail sales. Wednesday, which is more than likely the biggest one, we have FOMC, right, starting at 2 o'clock, and then 2:30 here, we have Fed Chair Powell giving his press conference and going over their decision, and kind of just giving remarks on the economy and the decision itself. Thursday, of course, we have GDP quarter over quarter and unemployment claims, and then Friday, we have PCE. So if you guys can't tell, right, we have data every single day this week. So that is obviously going to be very, very volatile. We're going to have a lot of ups and downs, in my opinion. But majority of that's going to be saved for Wednesday, right? We do have FOMC. I know a lot of people are speculating that it would more than likely be a pause. I don't know why the speculation is for a pause. We can take a look here, right? The probability is actually 96% that we cut or ease. The pause is about 4%. So I think it's just a little bit of fear mongering that we're seeing throughout Twitter or wherever it is online. 0% probability of a hike. So yes, if we do see a pause, right, or no change, or a hike, which is virtually impossible, that would obviously not be priced into the market. We'd see a huge reaction. But as of now, 96% chance that we do cut or ease. And yeah, that would be fantastic. I think the market just continues to trend. So that is that. I just wanted to kind of point that out. And now jumping that into kind of charts, right? MU. Obviously, a big position going into earnings here. This name's catching a lot of steam, finally. But kind of the same exact thing as it's always been, right? I mean, just kind of a range here, 95.77. Resistance is going to be 115. Ideally, this pops to the equilibrium right around 108. But this is definitely catching up or catching some steam here. Once again, on the weekly chart, we've talked about this multiple times where we have an 11-week inside bar, right? So from this mother bar here, it's been 11 weeks inside of that, the top and the bottom of that. You know, it really just kind of comes down to earnings, guys, and FOMC, if I'm being completely honest. I do expect a pop up to this resistance at 115. If we can get a pop here, I would like to see it kind of base and pull back onto that spot and turn that into support. And then I think this just continues to trend up. But obviously, I am a little bit worried the more eyes and attention this catches because I think a lot of people are trying to find the next Avgo, right? Avgo was very similar where it was consolidating. Albeit Avgo was consolidating at the highs, I do think that this name is a name people are kind of searching for to catch next, right? Because a big outperformer from its earnings. I think a lot of people are kind of expecting the same move just off of a consolidation here at the lows, right? So MU definitely big candidate for a big pop, but like I said, if there is going to be anything that happens, if this name gets overcrowded, I do think that we could get some kind of move that undercuts 95 and taps down into this gap fill here. Once again, a lot of liquidity is now being built at 95.77 with all these daily lows here. If that does happen, I think I would save some of my cash and add in this spot here, right? And then kind of look for that markup again. I wouldn't be too afraid of that dip. I mean, we do have until June on the contracts, but just something to keep in mind. If it sells from earnings and it mitigates here at 90.9, I think that's an add. If it starts to slip under 90.9, I think there's a potential that we come to 81.5, which would obviously not be good. I would look to long it again, but I think that would be a stop loss at that point. So yeah, just definitely something to keep in mind here. But overall, right, this chart shouldn't be unfamiliar to you guys. I've been talking about it literally since back here, guys. I've been talking about MU for so long. Obviously, we caught this big gap up, and we've just been trading 10, 11 weeks now in the same range. So this is make or break this week, right? I mean, this chart either looks super good and we get paid if it hits to 115, or if it breaks down to 90.9, obviously going to be some drawdown there, but opportunity to take more ads, and if it breaks that, a stop loss. So nothing new, right? Nothing new. Let's jump into some of the newer names though that we've been kind of, or I've been looking at. Some of them should be familiar as well, but this is going to be a pretty extensive watch list just because a lot of charts look good, and a lot of these names we've already traded the first phase of it. I just think we can see continuation, and I definitely want to keep it on the radar. Like I said, guys, chart should look very familiar. Roblox, if you guys remember, we ended up taking it initially when it broke through 53.88. It ended up hitting our gap at 59. I obviously closed out that position going into strength. I expected a high type flag, which we kind of got on this weekly bar from 12.9. Just didn't come down to exactly the spot I thought it would. I thought it would retest 53.88. You guys can clearly see the low of this week was a little bit higher than that, so I didn't get a perfect retest. So I did miss this, but all in all, right, I mean, this is a clear SOS or LPS, a breakout on harmonic volume, and then the candle's now closing really strong, right? I mean, obviously a long lower wick that was soaked up, and we closed back above this weekly high, right in our gap, and this still has plenty of opportunity to continue to run, and I'll show you guys on the daily here kind of what this looks like. Remember, the gap fill that we're targeting is from way back here. I think this was an earnings sell-off from like 215 a year or two back. But overall, right, this chart looks pretty good, right? I mean, we ended up kind of breaking back through this gap once again on harmonic volume, which is really important. We closed above the gap, and then ever since then, the past 2 days, so Thursday and Friday, tighter spreads on each one of them. Like I said, this tried to sell off, but buyers were able to push it back above the gap, and then the volume has completely mitigated, as you guys can see here. So breach of resistance, closed high and tight near the highs of that breakout candle above the gap, and then mitigated volume, meaning sellers do not have the pressure or enough sellers to back them to push this back under. So theoretically, this should see a squeeze out once those sellers kind of lose their footing. So if this starts to press through Friday's high or even these highs here from the weekly at 61, I think we start to see kind of like a short cover and then buyers stepping up their bid. So one of two triggers is really here for me, either calls above Friday's high at 60.26, I believe is the high here, or if we can open around 59 and show continued signs of strength, I'd be happy to add close to that 59 level. So there's two spots really, but let's say we open lower than 59 and we start to sell down. What should everybody's inclination be, right? Just be a little bit patient. There's obviously a gap here from the close to this open, so I would wait for this to sell down into 56. Theoretically, I think this is right where our EMA should be as well. I'll add them on really quickly. So this should catch up to like the 21, which is our little red line here. So don't need to be in a rush if this opens underneath 59 or it starts to lose 59. I would wait for this to get to the 56.26, maybe even actually retest that 53.88. But this chart still looks really good. We should definitely keep our eyes on this because we are a little bit higher than I think most of us would like. But if we take a look, right, if we just take, like, let's say we get our position here in the gap, this still has plenty of room to run to the gap fill, and that's about 24-25%, right? So still a very lucrative opportunity. Obviously, I wish I would have taken higher size here or anything like that, because that would have been a 50% win. But a 25 to 30% win is still fantastic, and it's something that you can't take your eyes off of, because the options, albeit a little bit more expensive than they used to be, are still very nicely priced compared to some of its peers in ARKK. And I think Roblox, still has a lot more juice left in the tank. So definitely keep this on watch. If anything, I still think June contracts are the way to go. If you guys remember, I was taking June contracts for the start of the gap, so like 60 calls. What do you guys think I'm going to be looking for now? More than likely the fulfillment of the gap. So I would be looking for June 70 calls or June 73 calls. I think those are still the best options to get some more time on them. Just in case, right, let's say we get a little overzealous and we take it when it thinks it's holding 59 and it starts to sell. Hey, we could be patient and wait till it pulls all the way back to 56. I can take an ad at 56 if there's a buyer that shows up, or if it comes all the way down to 53, I still have plenty of time to add into those contracts. They won't see a ton of drawdown, and I can just be patient and wait for my levels to confirm, and I can add into them, right? And I really wouldn't be so stressed out. Whereas if I was up here taking like January calls, you would experience a ton of drawdown. It would be very hard to add into those. They would lose a lot of value very quickly. So I still think June is the way to go. Like I said, looking at about 70 calls, or so I should say the 70 strike or the 73 strike is kind of the thing that I'm looking at the most. Okay, Roku looks ready as well. I wish it was a little bit lower, right? Kind of the same thing as Roblox. This still looks a little bit more structurally sound, I would say, than Roblox. You got to remember, Roblox basically breached the gap and has been holding for 2 days. This broke out and has been consolidating for a little bit longer. The EMAs have caught up to this very nicely. The one thing is, it really hasn't retested the top of this daily gap here at 78.61, right? This was that absorbed level. It did slightly pull back on this first breakout day, but it hasn't really given us a structural pullback. But it is building a nice bid here, as you guys can see by the daily bars just consolidating. EMAs, once again, if I kind of show the studies here, have caught up pretty nicely with the 9 EMA leading. But I would love to see this pull back, kind of push a little bit more, right? Or sorry, push down a little bit more. You have to think, right? Like I said, the daily gap's here at 78.61, but the actual gap fill was here at 76.97. That coincides pretty nicely with this here, right? This little gap up day. So if this can pull back down a little bit more, right, I would feel a little bit more comfortable from a risk to reward perspective. Obviously, the options would be a little bit cheaper, but we also need to consider, right, that this has been consolidating nicely against the 9 and just holding that resistance. So if this ends up breaking this little trend line that we have here, right, it looks a little bit cleaner if we kind of zoom out the chart. If it can break that downtrend line that we have currently forming on the daily, I would be okay taking a little bit of size, right? I might grab like once again like March, May, June, somewhere on that time frame, and then trying to target the top of the gap here. If you're a day trader, you normally would just target 86.57, which is this most imminent high. But if we can get a snap through that trend line, it's not my favorite entry, but if I had to take that, I'd be looking at either 94 or 95 calls for, like I said, June, May, kind of in that time frame, and then looking to add on the winner, right? If it can kind of break out base and kind of hold the top of this high at 86, I think it's an opportunity to add into the winner and then see if it can continue to go, or you guys can roll into new strikes. But in a picture perfect world, this pulls back a little bit deeper and kind of holds, like I said, 78.61, which is the top of that daily gap, down into the old gap fill here at 76.97, which ties in really nicely to the 21. Kind of this gap up day that we saw here from this inside bar, it would just line up a lot better. Risk to reward would be a lot better. The premiums would be a little bit cheaper, right? So that would be a picture perfect world. But this looks pretty primed to continue through this downtrend line. So I am comfortable taking a little bit of size into, like I said, the June 94, June 95 calls. And yeah, this thing still looks like it has a lot of room available. Let me get rid of the studies once again. Also, if you guys don't mind, if you guys comment, do you guys like seeing this better on Thinkorswim when I chart, or do you guys like seeing this more on TradingView? I still haven't really figured out like a sweet spot. I like charting on Thinkorswim a little bit more. I feel like I can walk through it a little bit easier because I don't update my charts all the time on this one, and I can do it more live. Or do you guys like it on TradingView? I feel like it's a little bit easier to read on there. I really haven't asked you guys, so whatever you guys prefer, I'll start doing it on there. But yeah, overall, looks pretty good, right? Kind of the same thing. We have a harmonic weekly breakout, closed near the highs here on low volume. This looks good. It just needs a little bit of consolidation, which we got, obviously, on the daily. And then we're just looking to trade either the continuation or a continued pullback that retests the actual highs of the breakout. So Roku, still on the list, guys. I know a lot of people have been asking me about this one. These things just need to take a little bit of time, right? A couple days or weeks of digestion is always healthy. And as long as the EMAs kind of keep guiding us the correct way, right, and we're basing old resistance as new support, we should be good, right? It's always just important to watch that volume, which we noted has been on low volume. So this is a very healthy chart, and I think this one sees continuation very easily. Okay, this is probably my favorite chart. It's not necessarily a new entry. I just wanted to cover it really quickly because we do have a position on this one. I think it's one of the better outperformers that I've alerted. But remember, really stemmed from this footprint candle here, one of the highest volume days ever that BA's ever had. It slightly undercut this, but I've assumed that this was buying, and I was just waiting for a recovery back above, or a reclaim back above that footprint candle low. We ended up recovering that, and remember, the first alert that I ever put on this was here. And then obviously we broke out to the top of this weekly, I guess it was the support, then became resistance as noted by all these wicks, and obviously the SR flip that we can clearly see. And I was expecting, once again, what is it that we usually expect on these? I don't always expect to break out the first time. A high tight flag. We ended up kind of pulling back into the EMAs. This is where I added more into the position, and then we ended up getting a really nice breakout through 159 that ended up being our low. So we kind of got like a gap, right? Because we closed here, we gapped above, we retested and went, so a gap and go. We ended up pushing towards the top of this gap here and rejected, and then remember, this is where we kind of closed, and then I started a new position again, a roll, at 167, and then we had really nice continuation into the 170 level, right? I suspect this continues to 173 to fulfill the gap fill, but just a really nice trade here. If I can show you guys the weekly, I mean, you guys can see just how strong this name is. One of the best performers in the market, right? And then overall, right, look at that weekly volume, how high and tight we close, just a very strong candle with strong volume. I suspect we either open at the gap, we open at the weekly close, or end up gapping up, honestly, for this one, and I see nothing really stopping this from reaching 173. So congrats to this one. I just wanted to put this out there. I know a lot of people have taken this position and have been doing exactly what I've been doing with rolls. Awesome job, congratulations. Or if you held core position, that's awesome as well. Really just a good opportunity to celebrate a really healthy and really clean trade, in my opinion. So congratulations. Okay, Nike, going to add this to the watch list. I did say as long as it kind of held either, we can kind of mess with this a little bit. If we end up jumping into this period here, remember we wanted to see it hold the bottom of this progression gap right around there. We did slightly undercut it, but I think it's okay, guys, because I did mention just this overall accumulation range is massive, and really a lot of it started back here going into that COVID 2022 gap. Remember, it was kind of back here on this blue line, but our footprint candle was here, right? That's very important to note the footprint candle in the start of the gap, which was from earnings. Remember, this technically up here is where the gap fill is, right around there at 94. But we ended up kind of doing this 3 lower low accumulation on incremental lows, and then we ended up having a huge pop. After we popped midway through the gap, what did we do? We pulled back and we retested that footprint candle, right? The start of the gap perfectly. We rallied again for a new high. We fizzled out. We sold back down. We started making lower highs, and we basically traded right back to the start of this accumulation, right? And I think we just honestly pushed back to collect more inventory. From here, we ended up pressing up again and are now consolidating against not only this old, kind of gap level here. This is where the gap started. This was the retest level, and this also kind of coincides with that gap that I was just talking about. That starts right here at 77.45. It didn't close right above it, but it closed relatively close and still back above this major 77 pivot. I think this honestly looks good for a small position. I would say kind of as a lotto to start, but I still want to get some time on it just in case the lotto doesn't trade directly to target. Right, I think this could get a pop all the way to 85, maybe even 89. But if let's just say this ends up popping above 79.86 again, and that kind of opens there, I'd be happy to add into this trade and kind of make it a core position if it can pull back and hold 79.86. Turn that into support, which is what it didn't do on this day here when it printed the shooting star. Remember, we actually had the position back here, or I think it was right here, as it started to kind of trend up, and we wanted to give it some time to consolidate against 77.45. And then remember, it broke out through 80. I told everybody to kind of trim into the strength, and obviously if it held and did what I wanted to do now with the pullback of 79.86 being support, then we could roll. Unfortunately, it closed like this, and we closed out for like a 14% win versus like a 30 or whatever we had initially. But if it can do the same thing, right, if it ends up pushing above 79.86, turns into support, I will turn this into a full position. So once again, I'm kind of looking at like June contracts, and I would be targeting 85 to 89. Very simple trade here. Basically, just rerunning back the same trade that we took before. Just starting it with lighter size just because we are going into earnings, and just the odd chance, right? Let's say this has some kind of killer earnings report. At least we have some kind of exposure on this that maybe it does push to 85 from earnings, or maybe it does go to 89. That would be a huge win, but even if it just gets a little pop here, we can build a position off 79.86 being held as support. Or if it fails, right, it's just kind of house money, I would say, just because we did trade this prior. So it wouldn't be that big of a loss, but just something definitely worth keeping your eyes on. They do report, I think it's, what day is it? The 19th, right? So end of week, what is the 19th? I think that's the Thursday. So Thursday should have an answer kind of as to what this will be doing the next morning on Friday. If we want to cut, add, or we end up having a really big win if it trades to 85 or 89. But I am going to be taking this week, and this should directly impact Lulu as well, which we do have a position on. Hopefully you guys kind of saw the thesis of that. I'm not going to cover it, but yeah, Lulu should benefit very nicely from this. All right, just a refresher here on Rivian. If you guys didn't see on Twitter, I think I'm going to start taking more equity positions, especially in names that I feel like have that accumulation look. We've talked a lot about Rivian being kind of like a 2022 schematic that we've seen in some of the ARKK names, and this name just looks primed. I did start a position way back here during this consolidation. I was undercut a little bit, and I've been in drawdown, but for the most part, I'm kind of right back to break even. The look that this thing has, guys, is fantastic with how it undercut these daily equal lows and kind of just sought liquidity and stopped a lot of people out here, only to reaccumulate in this general range here. The fact that it kind of pushed back out, reclaimed this zone, and is kind of giving this flag look. I think this has a pretty clear shot, in my opinion, all the way up to 18. So we're looking at about like a 35 to 40% move on the table here, just with just the underlying or equity position. I did say too that I might look at options. It's not my biggest concern, but if I was to take something, it would probably be end of 2025 or going into 2026, and I would just be targeting 19, right, which would be this new high here. I think from an equity perspective, I think this thing can go much further, right? I think we can get this all the way up to 2346, which would be about a 70% move, but that's more of a long-term hold, and that's kind of how I'm viewing Rivian. But like I said, if I do end up taking options, it would just be for this high here. And this overall looks pretty good, right? I mean, if I draw kind of like our trend line breakout, thing looks pretty freaking clean, man. And like I said, a lot of these names too usually start this way, where we have a gap down that gets held first. We end up kind of breaking out and absorb either in a new gap, or we end up undercutting a prior support, which we did on this one, and it's reclaiming that prior support and making that a newfound support once again, right? So this has a ton of opportunity now that it kind of undercut and acquired some liquidity from these stop losses here. This has a lot of fuel, in my opinion, so this can get going really quick. Obviously, EV, the whole theme, is kind of taking off as well. Obviously, Tesla controls a lot of that market cap, but I do think as a whole, we're going to start to see a lot of these names have some pretty big moves. So equity position, and then I'll consider leaps or end of 2025 options targeting 19, okay? But I just wanted to put this out as a refresher just so we don't lose track of this one. All right, guys. Crypto is kind of like one of the bigger things that I'm watching this week. You guys, and I've been very honest with this. I'm not that good at trading crypto names. It doesn't really fit my system, right? It's a lot of momentum where you really have to trade breakouts, and it's not about catching the retest. It's about just catching the breakout and the momentum through a resistance or off of the bottom. A lot of the times, too, you have to swing with, obviously, Bitcoin trading 24/7. I'm not always comfortable having my money being involved in swings and the volatility that comes with that, right? On top of that, it's usually not priced the best. The IV on the miners is insane. On Coin and MSTR and some of the better looking names, the options premiums are just extremely, extremely expensive. So if you get caught in consolidation with high IV, it loses premium really quickly, especially if it doesn't go the way you want. And then on top of that, with the names that are more expensive, they lose value really quickly as well, right? These delta and gamma ramps don't always work in the positive direction. If that starts to go opposite, you lose money really quickly. But using Coin is kind of like an analog here. Right, we always talk about the progression gap system, especially off of a peg or some kind of major gap up, which we experienced here, right? Coin ended up having this gap from here to here, right? And then what it ended up doing is pulling back down. It retested the top of the progression gap. It broke out, right? And then it ended up forming the top of the progression gap as now support. This gave a really nice move here from this range here for a false breakout over the top at 350, and then it kind of broke back down and is now holding the top of the progression gap as support again. Remember that analog, because if we take a look at Mara is kind of the same exact thing here, right? If we take a look where we have kind of like our progression gap here, right? And then we ended up having the low right around here. Obviously, it undercut it just a little bit, but it's almost the same exact system where it broke down, kind of held the bottom of the progression gap, ended up pushing out, broke out way further than I would have expected. It made a new high actually, but now it's pulling back to make the top of the progression gap kind of a support, right? And if we take a look at the weekly, this is even prettier. Look at the weekly here, where it's kind of pulling back down on, once again, decreased volume, which is very important that you guys can note here. It's retesting not only the progression gap, but this is technically the weekly open from that 11/11 week. And then it's a little bit nicer on top of that, right? If we take our EMAs, this is retesting the 9 EMA almost perfectly. So if there's going to be a spot that this bounces from, guys, it's going to be this 22.3 level, in my opinion. I don't know if it's going to make a new high. I really don't have an idea as to where I would target. My inclination would be 27.3, which is this old weekly high here. It kind of failed to break out through that spot and might have trapped some people. So naturally I'm looking at the 27 call as like a target. This could definitely go a lot higher. And usually with these themes, right, a lot of these Bitcoin names, it is important to kind of look at not only Bitcoin itself, which looks primed for a breakout. As I've said, it looks good for like 115K, 120K, but also kind of like the news cycle, man. Like if you guys didn't know, they were just talking about this, that Trump is potentially going to use Bitcoin as a U.S. reserve asset on day one. There's potential that it will drive about $20 billion of BTC purchasing in 2025. There's another rumor that this could help in like 15 trillion in market cap being added to Bitcoin. That would obviously start to push that up towards that 200K mark, 300K mark for Bitcoin. And if this starts to happen, guys, the Fed starts going out, you're going to see a lot of other people trying to jump in and collect the remaining supply, right? I know Microsoft just voted against it, but Amazon has a vote. I'm sure you're going to start to see more people want to jump in on this and try to get as much supply as they can before the Fed kind of steps in. So this could really expedite things, right? So I think Mara would be a really big candidate, especially off of this level. It looks really good. I've talked a lot about flows coming into the final 2 weeks of December. So just from a thematic standpoint, the chart standpoint, this thing looks pretty damn good. Now, if we take a look at some of the other ones, I won't kind of clip around this one. Coin looks good as well. I mean, this name does look primed for a move. It's so tight, guys. It's so tight. Like, it doesn't look as clean, right? Obviously, we could potentially take calls against this 296 spot, but it's so highly priced, guys. I was kind of looking at like March, like 420, 450, $500 calls, and those are about $2,000 per option or per contract. I don't know if everyone would be able to take that. If you go into drawdown on that one, I don't think some people would even be able to average in. So it's a really tough choice, on what to do with coin, especially if you experience drawdown. But this could be the one, because if you guys didn't know, Trump also met with the CEO of Coinbase and was kind of talking about making them the potential candidate to hold that Federal Reserve coin. There's a lot that's going towards coin, right? Coin is probably the number one name, and I think that's why the options are priced so highly. Obviously, this gaps up a lot and it has a ton of movement, but there's a reason the price movement is being priced in this way, because coin is more than likely going to see the most amount of movement if we see a positive catalyst from the Fed, right? So if I am going to take anything on that one, honestly, it might be like a 450 call. Contracts, like I said, are like $2,000 on that one. I might just take like 2 or 3 and just hold that. But as of right now, Mara probably looks the best, so this will probably be my focus here off of this 22.3 spot, or just a breakout through this Friday high. I think that's a really good opportunity. And one other thing too I want to bring up is CLSK. If this can really catch a bid off of this 1146, and really, guys, I was honestly looking here, right? If it can break out through 1324, I do think that this can trade back up to that 1787 spot. Obviously, this chart isn't as structurally sound as some of the other ones. It doesn't look as good. But remember, this is kind of the same mold as Rivian and some of these other names that have undercut these massive daily equal lows. There's a lot of buyers that were here. It swept them out, and it looks like it's starting to build, or has been building, an accumulation in this range here. And now, what did it do? It kind of built out a spot here. It undercut a new level, and it's kind of trading back down into this gap here, which I really want to note right around here, right? Kind of this 11.4 leading down into here, right at around 1056. I think this is the best possible entry for this new trade. Or, right, if it kind of gaps up, I said over 1324, this looks good again. But if we take a look at the weekly, guys, this name looks pretty good. It looks pretty damn good, right? Kind of like trying to hold this level here. A lot of volume coming in, trying to hold 1324. It undercuts it, right? And if this can reclaim back above 1324, I think that this can rally pretty easily back up to 18. And eventually, I think it trades back up towards these highs up here, right? Towards that top of that liquidity. So CLSK, I hate to break it to you guys. I think this will be an equity trade. I don't really want to trade options on this one because the swings on this one are pretty volatile. I think if there's going to be a miner, it would more than likely be Mara, or I would trade Coin. But this name does have opportunity here from 11.4 to 1056. These two lower blue lines is like kind of like my optimal entry for an equity position. Or if it can break out through 1324, I would grab shares here, right, and then kind of look to target this up into 1787, which would be a really good move, guys. If we took the breakout here, that's a 35% move. Or if we were able to capture the optimal entry, that would be about a 70% move. So this name could pay out really, really big, and a lot of people really aren't talking about this one. So I do like CLSK, Mara, and Coin as kind of my options here. All right, last but not least, Joby. If you guys don't know about this one, I've talked about this one a long time ago. It was somewhere back here, but I've known about this company for a while. Essentially, it's an all-electric vertical takeoff company that focuses on like taxi services, right? So for dropping people off from one location to another, and it's essentially a giant drone, but using its full capabilities to just deliver either items or people to different locations as a taxi service. And it's thematically kind of perfect, right? If you guys haven't been paying attention to the news over the past like week or two, there's a lot of drone conversation going on in New Jersey, New York, etc. Albeit different purposes. I believe over there it's trying to find like nuclear hazardous material. And yeah, we don't really know the exact specifications of that. The government's kind of keeping it low key, but a lot of eyes are on drones right now. And it's interesting to see how this kind of broke out here on 11/25. It retested it for the second week here on 12/2. Had a really strong candle in my opinion where it had a long lower wick on that retest. And then it sold again. And obviously this isn't a good sign to see it selling back down after such a strong bar. But if it doesn't break below 759, right, this is, in my opinion, a very strong support at that point. And what would end up happening is some kind of relief bounce into a gap to the upside, or it tries to trend and make a new high. Luckily for us, there is a nice little gap where I think we can catch a nice momentum trade. This would be a very short dated contract. So clearly the gap is from here because it did gap down. So from the close to the open here, so 807 to 854, it's like a 50-cent range that we're working with. But nonetheless, with something that's this cheap, that would still be a pretty good move. That's right around 6% on the underlying. So all I would be looking at is a breakout through 807 on a lower time frame. If it can turn this into support, I would look to get into some shorter dated stuff because I do want to capture the momentum on this, unlike shorter dated stuff. So I would look for like January 17th, $8.50 calls or $8 calls. I wouldn't go super heavy, but just looking for like a quick stat pad on my account with this one, and then seeing if it can press up into 854. If it does that, maybe keep a couple runners to see if it can press the highs at like $9 or like 932. That would be awesome. But this is a very short dated contract that I think we can capture on a really nice weekly retest here for the second consecutive week on a very, I wouldn't say hot theme, but a rising theme, right, with drones and taking advantage of the news cycle. I think this could be a nice little opportunity here. So that's pretty much going to be it, guys. I was going to add one thing in here, but I have a position on it, and I really haven't added into it. Lamb Research, I've talked about this one so many times. If we kind of zoom out to the monthly, it's retesting this big monthly breakout here for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, or 4 months now technically, and then obviously this month is to be determined. But kind of giving this falling wedge kind of vibe off 72.84. We've undercut it 1, 2, 3, 4 times now on incremental lower lows. So very interesting setup here. If we take a look at the daily, giving us this inverse head and shoulders look, with this being the head here, right? We kind of have the left shoulder against that support and now the right shoulder against the support as well. This thing looks freaking primed. I might add into this one. Remember, I have the June contracts, the June 105s. I'm targeting this gap fill way up here, so this is going to take a little bit of time. But MU report, so if we can get like a nice pop here, I do think we can press above these highs here at 79.75, right? So I'll draw a little line here. This is kind of our short-term resistance here, this little red line. We can break out through this. I think we can turn this into support, right? And then I think we can start to trend up to this 86 spot, which was our major breakdown from like 10.15. If we can get back above that, right, you guys kind of get the picture. We can start to trend all the way up to 101.92. This might take some time, but this is why I took June contracts. I think we can periodically add into this one and add on higher lows. But this is a chart that I am looking at. I just want to see how MU does. I don't want to have double whammy exposure into MU and be heavy LRCX and get, kind of destroyed on both of them if MU doesn't perform well. But definitely something I'm watching as well. But that's going to be the scan, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. A lot of names that I covered. A lot of them are going to be pretty much riding on the strength of ARKK, and then obviously looking at Bitcoin. And then whatever happens with semis. Obviously, semis are a big part of my positions right now with MU. But if I can hit semis, MU does really well. I think there's an opportunity to start rolling into some of these crypto names and some of the other ARKK names. And yeah, should set up for a really good end of year push on my account. And yeah, hopefully everybody's doing well. I'm very, very excited for this week. It feels like we've been waiting so long for MU to play out. And yeah, it's finally going to happen on Wednesday. So very excited. And yeah, let's try to make it a great week.